Hello there, this is Cassie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you are having a wonderful Wednesday. I am over on the Brutus Monroe blog making a couple of cards today, and let me show you some of the products I'm going to be using. This first product is called the Locomotive Surface Spray. Then I'm going to be using the Circle Simple Blends and also the February stencil of the month, which is just gorgeous, and yes, mine is pretty well loved at this point. And then we're also going to be using the Tree of Thanks stamp set. I do bring in another stamp set later on, but I will show you because things took a turn, and I thought for the better. And then we're also going to be using the Glitter Glaze of the month, and this one is called Morning Glory. Isn't that beautiful? All right, so let's go ahead and get started with what we're doing. I have some whitewash cardstock cut down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And I'm going to take the February stencil of the month, and I'm just going to place that on there inside of my makeshift splatter box. And I make sure if you're going to be using the surface sprays that you spray them up, or shake them up really well. So I shook mine up really, really well, and I spritzed this all over that piece. And then I knew I had a lot of ink left over on, or some more spray left on my stencil, so I flipped it over onto this lunch bag cardstock scrap that I had sitting there. I did not want to waste it, and I'm so happy I didn't, because look at when I pull this away. The detail. Oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. So here you have stencils two ways. You can use the way it's, typically intended, and then this way, just getting that extra surface spray, and then the detail. Oh my gosh, I just had to make 2 cards after seeing how that worked out. So I'm going to heat set these so that they are good and dry. Surface sprays are different than any other sprays that are really out there because you can layer them up and then they kind of give you some texture as well. I didn't do that in this case, but you definitely can. So I'm going to take my Circle Simple Blend, and I see that I did not put the stencil or spray the stencil on there very straight, or not necessarily straight, but very centered. So I'm going to kind of center my Simple Blend, and then I'm going to end up trimming away some of the paper later. But I wanted that Simple Blend to be on there because I want to take some of the Glitter Glaze of the month, and I want to spread that all over that circle. So this stuff is absolutely beautiful. It's called Morning Glory, as I said before. And you're just going to want to take your palette knife and you're going to want to stir that around a little bit because sometimes the bits in there can settle at the bottom. So you'll just stir it around and make sure you have that good and evenly spread out. And then now you can start spreading it all over whatever you want to use it on. And I did spread mine a little bit thick on there, just trying to cover that whole circle. You may not want to do it this thick because it will take a little bit of time to dry. So I'm going to put all that away, and then I'm going to peel back the Simple Blend, and then I'll clean up my mess here in a second. But this stuff is just beautiful. Oh, just love that glitter glaze. So like I said, I'll set that off to the side. And then I'm going to start working on the other card while that dries. So I've just got my lunch bag piece. I'm going to stick that into my Tim Holtz guillotine trimmer and trim that down to about the size that I want. Of course, Max is very interested in what we're doing, and so he's on my lap the whole time. I do decide I want to cut out that circle, and I know that Brutus Monroe has some circle dies. I don't have them, so I'm going to use my old stash of Nestabilities. I mean, look at those. Those are some old Nestabilities. Probably about, at least 10 years old. And I'm going to take some, I ran that through my die cutting machine, and now I'm going to cut down some whitewash cardstock, because that's going to end up being my card base. And I'll put this into my score buddy, and I'm going to score this at 4 1/4 inches. So these will be side folding A2 size cards. And then I do that for both of them because I'm just going to have both bases be the exact same. I just figured there would be a little cohesion between the two of them. And then I'm going to put this inside of my Misti because I plan to do some stamping, but I want to line up how those birdhouses are going to look in there. And those birdhouses come from the Feathered Home stamp set. This is where I pulled in that second set. And I'm going to ink this up with some surface inks in the color Locomotive. I wanted everything to be sort of matchy-matchy. So I'm inking those up, and I'll stamp that down. And one of the things you have to realize about surface inks is that these will, now they'll go on all kinds of surfaces, but they will stain your stamps, your polymer stamps. It doesn't affect the way they stamp. It just kind of makes them stained, which I don't care. I like well-used stamps. I feel like they almost stamp better. And then I'm going to put the card back into, or my base back into my Misti, line up all the birdhouses on the bottom, ink those up with that Locomotive ink, and then I'll stamp that down because I want this to be how the inside of the card looks. So this is just fun. Like I said, I've really been enjoying stamping the insides of my cards lately. I don't do it with the other one. Or no, actually I do. I just don't show you because I do the exact same thing. So we're just going to line that up and then ink up the birdhouses again and do just so that the birdhouses are all across the bottom of that inside of the card base. And it's so cool. But yeah, like I said, the surface inks will stain your stamps. It does not affect how they stamp. I wanted some cardstock that matched, but I don't have any. So I'm just taking a piece of that whitewash cardstock and putting the surface ink all over just a piece of paper, just that piece of paper. I'm going to heat set that because I want to make sure that that doesn't have any residue that will stick to it, and it does. So I'm going to have to like reheat it again, put some magic powder over the top, ink it up with the Hello stamp, cover that with my embossing powder, and then I'll heat set that till that is smooth and melted. So if you weren't going to do any heat embossing on it, you wouldn't necessarily have to go through all the steps that I just did. And now we're going to kind of place that on the front of the card to see where I want it. My little helper Max is trying to make sure that I have it lined up, perfectly. And then I will stick that down after I've kind of lined everything up on my glass mat. And then I'll flip that over and I'll trim off all of the excess. And then we're going to line the back of all that with some of the Brutus Monroe foam tape. And then I'll peel off all of the release paper, just using a paper piercer just to kind of get underneath that release paper and peel all of that away. And then once all the release paper is gone, I will stick that down to the front of my card base. And that's going to finish off our first card. So now we're going to move on to the original card that I had planned to make, which was this one. And it's not totally dry because, like I said, I did that fairly thick. And you'll be able to tell because it'll be kind of warped, because it's wet. So I'm going to heat set that. And let me just give you the suggestion, if you do plan to heat any of your glitter glaze or anything like that, you definitely want to make sure that you keep your heat tool moving. Otherwise, you will cause the product to bubble. And maybe that's the look you're going for. It wasn't in my case. And I even ended up putting my hand into a little bit while it wasn't completely dry. After I even move it, it's okay. It doesn't really bother me that much. But this is, at this point, fairly dry. I just messed it up, just by touching it too much. So now I'm going to put it into my guillotine trimmer and trim down the sides a little bit. And again, because I wanted that to match, I'm going to take my surface ink and just rub that along just the side of my card base. I'm going to do a little bit more on that. You don't see me do it, but I do make the strip a little bit bigger. And then once again, I want to be able to stamp my sentiment onto some of the paper that would match. So I'm going to go through the exact same process that I just did by inking up some of that paper, heat setting it. I don't know why I did the magic powder bag on it first and then heat set it. That didn't make much sense. But at this point, I don't have any powder sticking, so we will stick it inside of my Misti. This is the mini Misti, pardon my head. And I'll line up the thank you from the Tree of Thanks stamp set. And then I'm going to stamp that across, once again using some embossing ink. And then I'll cover that with the Alabaster embossing powder. And then I'll heat set that till that is smooth and melted. And then once all that is melted and dried, because you do want to give it a second to cool, so that's why I'll put away all my goodies. And then I'm going to stick that inside of my guillotine trimmer and trim that down. And then we'll be ready to adhere that to the card front. So I'm going to use some liquid glue to adhere down this panel to my card base. And I'm going to stick it all the way to the left-hand side so that I have that little blue line kind of poking through. I put some foam tape on the back of my sentiment, and then I'm just going to peel back the release paper and put that down on the card front. And then I am going to pull out the birdhouses again and stamp those down on some more of that whitewash cardstock with that same Locomotive surface ink. And then I'm going to fussy cut each of the little birdhouses out. And then I'll put some foam tape on the back of each of the little birdhouses, pull away all of the release paper, and then we'll be ready to start adhering the little birdhouses down. So it's kind of fun how one card idea turned into two cards. Like I said, was not planned to make both of these cards here today. This one that I'm doing now is the only one that I had planned to do. And I didn't even originally have planned to bring in the feathered home stamp set, but now that I have, I love it. So here we have our first card, and then we also have the second one. And I just, Love how these turned out. I think they're fun little pairing of cards. So like I said, I'm over on the Brutus Monroe blog, so if you want to head on over there and check it out, please do so. I will have that linked down below. If you liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And as always, I will see you very soon in the next video. Thanks for stopping by.